When I was 12, I won a prize for writing an essay, and part of the prize was a trip around the local paper. I was taken around by an old retainer of the Burrows dynasty, and I met the news editor. He said, when you leave school and if you get 6 O-levels, you can come back maybe here and be a proper reporter. So I lived on this for years, and I was at school, and when I left school, having reminded them, I got this letter back. Actually, the careers master wrote to the paper, and he got a letter back saying, you might as well try and sell drumsticks as sell boys. So I was crushed utterly, and they didn't know what to do with me. So I became someone in the city. I went to work in the head office of the Sun Insurance office, yawning my head off. Didn't know how to do it because I couldn't do maths. And then the Southend Standard advertised for 2 trainee journalists. And I wrote, and they took me on. And the other one was Mike Wagstaff, who ran the NJCT course at Harlow for some years. And we're still great mates. And from there I did all the usual things, riots, civil commotion, chasing fire engines, courts, councils, you name it, I did it. Then I did my national service and came back a lot more self-confident than when I went in. And then I felt I couldn't stay any longer because my then girlfriend had suddenly got a job in the Parliamentary press gallery, and I thought I can't be left behind in Southend. So somehow or other, with a bit of nepotism, I got a job at the Press Association. And there I did the usual things. A bit more fire engine chasing, a bit more riot and civil commotion, courts, councils, a bit Northern Ireland, a bit of this, a bit of that. And then, donkey's years later, they asked me to be the royal correspondent, which I didn't accept with alacrity because I didn't really want to do it because it's a bit of a poison chance. Life on the Southend Standard at 85 Fleet Street. Yeah, we used to call it Dotheboys Hall. It's like Watford Squeers. Spell window, clean it. We weren't allowed to use the phone. The phone was the territory of the chief reporter at Del Flatley. We weren't allowed to use the lift. That was the territory of the managing director, John H. Burrows, TD, Deputy Lieutenant, Chairman of Southend Magistrates, Chairman of Southend Law Society, you name it, he was everything, Pooh-Bah. So we had to leg it round or go on our bikes. I used to go on my bikes. It was a Raleigh, which my dad bought me for coming top of the class. The first time I'd ever done it when I was 8. And I was still riding around it when I was 18. So it was Canvey Island, or the Canvey Floods. Oh yeah, the great Canvey Floods, I always remember that. Yeah, God, waking up in the morning and looking out the window and seeing water all around Lee and Canvey with television masts propping up. The Canvey Floods, yeah, I went down there out of a sense of duty. I thought I'd better, and I really was overtaken by the senior reporters, particularly a wonderful guy, the Canvey reporter called David Jones, who wrote one of the best pieces I've ever seen about the East Coast floods. Yeah. And of course the news editor was there and the sub-editors were there. And it's all been written, People were sitting on an upturned boat with water lapping around their ankles. There was one reporter called Malcolm Bayliss who rescued a baby floating in its carriage cart. Yeah, I vividly remember the floods. But I was very junior then. I'd only just got there really. Didn't know what to do. Wandering around sucking my thumb. That was one of my unfinest hours. But Southend Quarter Sessions, Essex Societies, Essex Quarter Sessions in the Shire Hall, in the days when the Red Judge used to come down from London. Oh God, I always remember Mr. Justice Castles, and he was a former journalist, and he was always dishing out the quotes. And I remember Myra Randall, one of Southend's biggest madams, turned up, and she produced this huge crucifix from her bosom and said, "My lord," she said, "I'm not guilty, I was not running my brothel in York Road, as God is my judge. And Jimmy Castles was heard to remark to his clerk, God's not her judge, Jimmy Castles her judge, and she's going to get 5 years. And she did. Well, they were great fun days, Essex Quarter Sessions, and that's where I met my wife, in the press bench at Essex Quarter Sessions. Yeah, no, it's Essex Assizes. Yeah, it was great fun, and we started going out together, and it was cemented. She was engaged to somebody else at the time, and I didn't really, I didn't even catch on, even when the great big diamond ring disappeared from my finger. I still didn't catch on. And suddenly she said, would you like to come to the Essex Press Ball? So I said yes, and that was really to be at the Press Ball. And she was a much better dancer than me. She was a great rock and roller. She used to go to the Corn Exchange and rock and roll. And one of her boyfriends when she was very young was a police cadet called Tony Roberts, who became very, very senior Essex policeman. And she used to dance there. And she always complained about my corners. She always said my corners weren't good enough for her corners. I thought I was quite good. But at this particular press ball in the Lion and Lamb, she had to judge, or she was one of the judges, for the Essex Press Queen. And the story goes that it was rigged. They had to award the Essex Press Queen for contact reasons to Crystal Barkway, the daughter of Chief Superintendent Barkway of the Essex Police. And Kathleen refused to award it to Crystal Barkway, and she's always a troublemaker. And there was a bit of trouble over that. Anyhow, but Crystal won it on points. Everybody else went for Crystal. One of the other judges was a girl in the Essex Chronicle. Oh God, what was her name? Oh, I can't remember her name now, but she was a journalist on the Essex Chronicle. And she voted for Crystal. And now that was the Essex Press Ball, and it just went on from there. I used to take her to the theatre, used to take her up west dancing, used to go to Humphrey Littleton's in Piccadilly. We used to stand on his feet. And then the Saints came marching in. We used to go down King's Road to coffee bars. Cliff Richard used to sing and play in one of the coffee bars there. And Tommy Steele. It was a completely new world for us. We were sort of young, completely feckless. Yeah, and then sort of responsibility began to come in, and then my mother-in-law started talking about wedding dresses. So, yeah, we got married in Chelmsford with the ring on the finger at the Catholic Church in London, where Kathleen, in fact, had been baptised. Or the end of the beginning. She certainly did not propose to me. No, my wife did not propose to me. I proposed to her. But not on bended knee. I think I said the immortal was, well, I suppose we ought to get married, really. And she said, well, I'd taken that for granted. So we did. We got married young. And like so many young couples in those days, we sort of spent our time going to the Ideal Home exhibition and looking in furniture shop windows. And got most of our stuff from Bolingbroke and Wingless. Now no longer with us, tragically. The Harrods. I didn't take to my national service like a duck to water, but nobody did. And it was the most brutal thing, basic training. It was quite frightening. I wasn't a natural soldier, but I was very, very lucky that I got a superb, smashing, easy job. After I'd done my basic training as sort of secretary, personal assistant sort of thing, to the CEO of this huge training centre in Wiltshire, who, when he retired, he was a widower. And when he retired, he became a Dominican monk and the abbot of his order. His name was Hamish Campbell. And he let me do what I liked, really. Put my feet up on the desk, let me grow my hair long, smoke cigarettes in the office. And I was icy postings, I remember. And I posted my cousin, who turned up there as a squaddy, to Christmas Island, something which I think he probably never forgave me for. Highly dangerous place, but I didn't know it was a dangerous place in those days. You know, all sorts of things going off and getting into your blood. But yeah, as I see postings, yeah, they wrote a poem about me, about my basic training. What was it? I can't remember. Yeah, it was the CSM. the CSM said, "On Wiltshire ground, a hidden treasure we have found." That's all I can remember of it. I just used to go down every weekend. I just sort of know. I used to hitch lifts sometimes, and I once hitched a lift, and the lady who picked me up was Diana Dawes. She'd been to see her mum in Swindon, and every weekend she used to go down and see her mum and dad in Swindon. There's a statue to Diana in Swindon now, and we got on. We had a regular pick-up point. Of course, she wouldn't pick me up outside the barracks. I used to have to tramp to a place called Beckhampton Corner, about a couple of miles up the road, where Gordon Richards had his stables. And I used to wait there, and Diana used to pick me up. And she was wonderful. She always used to bring a thermos flask and jam sandwiches for me, which her mum made for her, and she said I couldn't possibly eat those, darling, you eat them. And years later, when I was at Her Majesty's Press Association, I had to cover the press briefing for the National Theatre's season, and Diana was playing in Oedipus Rex, and she was playing Oedipus's mother, Jocasta. And I went up to her and I said, "Miss Dawes, do you remember me?" And she said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, you used to give me a lift, from Wallabout's Devices Wilts, Beckhampton Corner. You used to drop me off at Maidenhead." And she said, "Well, there are so many young shoulders, darling." And I was like put out that she didn't remember me. Also, when I was at Southend, I had to go to dancing lessons, because I was told by one of the more senior reporters that I'd never get a proper girlfriend. No good going to the Kersal Ballroom if you couldn't dance. And so I went to the Leslie Mitchell School of Dancing in South Church Road. And my dancing partner was a girl called Little Linda Bates. She was about 13, I suppose. I was about 18. And she was the sister of a friend of mine called Reggie Bates. And their father was the mayor of Southend, Michael Bates, of Bates, Son and Brady, the solicitors in Southend. And donkey's years later, when I worked for the Press Association, I sent out to cover, I sent out to the desert. Prince Charles was doing a sort of a media photo op for the Gulf War. And Little Linda Bates, who got a Southend Council bursary to go to Rhodey and did really well, went into politics. There she was, as Secretary of State for Defence in a tank. And she was then Baroness Chalker of Wallasey in Essex. And I went up to her and said, "Lady Chalker, do you remember the Leslie Mitchell School of Dancing in South Church Road, Southend? And the Samba?" And there again it was called, "But who are you?" And I said, "Well, I used to partner you." And she looked hard at me, and I suppose I was still recognisable then. "So you did." And she took me back to Cairo, and we had several good stiff gin and tonics and a lovely chat. Well, I went back to the Southend Standard after my national service, because they still had about, I think, 6 months to do of my, in the Southend Standard they didn't call it apprenticeship, it was much too grand. They called it pupillage, of my pupillage. And so I had to stick out another 6 months, but I in fact stayed for 2 years. Because one of the first things they did, they sent me to Chelmsford to cover the courts, the Quarter Sessions and the Assizes. I used to spend most of the day in the Quarter Sessions and the Assizes, then break off, dash across to County Hall, cover the County Council or the Education Committee or something like that. Anything that happened in Chelmsford area which affected the Southend Standard circulation area, like the Essex show, the Dyson meetings, anything really, anything which affected our circulation area. So I did everything, courts, councils, and there sitting in the press seat was this enchanting girl from the Essex Weekly News with this great big diamond ring on her finger. And I was told her, "That's Paddy Travers' daughter." And I said, "Who the hell's Paddy Travers?" "Well, don't you know, he was on the Telegraph, he does a lot of politics at the Daily Telegraph. And he used to be on the Essex Chronicle 1,000 years ago, but he left because they paid him so little. And his big breakthrough was finding out that the Mayor of Chelmsford had fiddled with the rations for the mayoral banquet, and now he had to leave after that. So he got a job at PA, and then the Daily Telegraph. He said, well, that's Paddy Travers' daughter. He's a real mad Irishman. So I thought, nice, I did my chat-up line with this girl, but I did see the big diamond engagement ring. I thought, well, dangerous ground maybe. I've been in enough trouble with girls as it was. I didn't want any more trouble. And anyhow, we got to know each other, and we sort of followed each other around. Courts, councils, Essex River Board, as it's called then, the Rural Council, anything, boiled to death. We used to like the Essex River Board because they used to give us a nice tea, even for the press. It was cream cakes and tea from Cannon's restaurant. I always remember that, in Duke Street. Anyhow, Kathleen disappeared. And her father, I think it was nepotism, got her a job at the PA. By which time I was serious, and then this great big diamond ring disappeared. And I didn't really understand this. I thought, oh God, she's lost it. I knew she was engaged to a guy called Jack Stockdale, who was on the Barking Advertiser or something. And I also, somebody told me she was trying to get rid of him. It was a wrong sort of man for her. And what happened? Yeah, oh yeah. Then suddenly Kathleen came up to me in November, it was November 1959. And it was the Essex Press Board, what was then a respectable outfit, the Lion and Lamb, in their ballroom, which became Decadence or whatever they called it, dreadful sort of discotheque place. And I went to this press ball, and after them we didn't look back. And we fairly quickly got engaged and married. She was at the Telegraph, and I couldn't be left behind. And I got this offer at the PA because I had superlative shorthand. I could do, believe it or not, 160 words a minute. And in those days you reported everything at length, great length, court cases and things like that. And I went to the PA. And I was about to say I never looked back, but probably I did, because the Standard tried to get me back. We upped my pay to £16 a week. Voluntarily, a terribly flamboyant Southend journalist trained me, and he was a larger-than-life character. While I was there was a national television competition called Top Town, and Dell stage managed Southend's entry. And I remember going to auditions, when I had nothing to do, which wasn't very often, just to watch Dell sort of mastermind the auditions. And he sat there, eyes and teeth, darling, do yourself now, darling, ready, darling, to the pianist, and off we went. Because Dell was the theatre darling, it's my life. He should have been on the stage, he really should. And anyhow, Southend, by some miracle, won Top Town. And the junior reporters used to call him Emil Flatler, after the great impresario Emil Littler, who owned virtually every West End theatre. We couldn't get round Val Parnell, who ran the Palladium. And now on April Fool's Day, myself and Mike Wagstaff, who was another junior reporter with us, this was immediately after Southend winning Top Town, April Fool's Day, we left a note on Dell's desk. It said, Mr. Flatley, because it's always Mr. Flatley. Mr. V. Parnell rang from the London Palladium, said something about the Palladium and Top Town. And Dell actually rang the Palladium. Flatley here from the Southend Standard. Can I speak to Mr. Parnell, please? Of course, all hell broke loose.
Did you go in the naughty corner for this? Did they find out?
They never found out because we typed it, this note. And all the typewriters were the same. Could have been anybody. And nobody ratted on us. Anecdotes about Dell, well, they're endless, really. He was a great character. I was scared stiff of him, in some ways. but we warmed to each other as the years went by. He was an outrageous character. And he always started his stories with, "The Standard understands." I don't know why. To my great sadness, I went to Southend Library to look up the bound copies of the Standard. And I wanted to look up my years, look at stories I'd written. Like all journalists, you have a supreme, overweening ego. I just had to look up my stories. And they were dumping them. They were going to put them on the bonfire. And I said, "Can I buy them?" I mean, this record of Southend's history from 1872, when the Standard was founded, to this was in the 1990s. "No, you can't buy them. No, you can't, no." So there's a great treasure, a great slice of Southend's history went on the bonfire. Criminal. Burroughs would be turning in his grave, let alone Henry Burroughs, who was, I think, the chairman of Essex County Council at one stage, and that was his father. The Southend Standard by then had sort of become the Standard Recorder, sort of almost like a Basildon type newspaper, because the Evening Echo had taken over, really. Nobody wanted to know about the dear old Southend Standard, which was such a force, actually, in Southend. It really was a force. Everybody in Southend took the Southend Standard. I think its circulation was about 90,000. People used to send it to their relatives abroad. We used to have 2 or 3 copies a week delivered. I know when I did my paper round, when I was a boy in Lee, I used to dread Thursdays because it was Southend Standard Day. And I was lugging this huge newspaper around, trying to stuff it through the letterboxes, Everybody took the Southend Standard. It was the Bible. Yes and no, I was nervous at the thought of taking the leap from Southend up to Fleet Street, which was, it had that glamour, Fleet Street. It was something I never ever thought of doing. My ambition was to go to the Eastern Daily Press. But I used to meet the guys from the PA when they came down to the Shire Hall for the big cases. And occasionally I did a bit of standing in for them. After the opening, they went out and did the opening couple of days, and I stand in for them while whatever big trial it was proceeded. So I was known a little bit at the PA. And one or two of them said, "Well, why don't you go to the PA? Why don't you come and join us? You've got great shorthand." And also, Kathleen, my then fiancée, she had gone to the PA, to the Parliamentary Press Gallery. And she was there, and I thought, well, I can't be left behind. Well, how did I join Her Majesty's Press Association? Well, there was a combination of things. One was that my fiancée, or fiancée-to-be, had gone to the Press Association from the Essex Weekly News, and they put her in the Parliamentary Press Gallery, and she was the youngest reporter to have reported Parliament since Charles Dickens. She was 20 and he was 21. She was secretly rather proud of that. And also I used to meet the guys from the PA who used to come down to Essex Assizes for the big trials, and sometimes they'd let me do cases. So I was a little bit known at the PA. And also my father-in-law to be, Paddy Travers, he had been at the PA and he pulled a couple of strings and I got an interview. And because of my superb shorthand, 160 words a minute, they took me on, but I was scared stiff. I mean, it was a huge news factory, 24 hours round the clock, and all the big stories, and you just had to do it. And I conquered my nerves, and I did. I did everything really. Riot, civil commotion, big trials, interviewing big names, all sorts of stuff, and it was really quite interesting. And I also did Parliament too. I used to do a lot of stuff at the committee stage, and one of the things I had to do that I got lumbered with every year was the first 2 or 3 years was the committee stage of the finance bill. And I had absolutely no idea about maths or anything of finance. And the financial secretary to the Treasury at those days was Margaret Thatcher. And she was very, very sweet to me. And in one of the intervals, I was sitting there sucking my thumb, wondering what on earth to write about. She said, "How are you getting on, dear?" And I said, "Well, Mrs. Thatcher," I said, "I find this very puzzling." She said, "Come with me, dear." And she took me into her office and she sat me down and made me a cup of tea. Or was it coffee? I can't remember now. And she took me through the finance bill, word by word, in words of one syllable. And she saved my bacon. And I thought that was rather nice. Yeah, and I did all sorts of things. And then they sent me to Europe to cover the EU, one of the 3 PA journalists to cover the European Parliament. And I was there for 3 years. I used to commute from Chancellor on Mondays and come back on Fridays. And then I suddenly got this call. I was called back to the head office bunker, and I was to be the Press Association's court correspondent, accredited to the Court of St James, the royal correspondent, something which terrified me. I mean, I knew about the royal family, but obviously I did history and all the rest of it, but I never thought I'd ever get this job. And suddenly there I was, landed in Buckingham Palace, wondering who the hell gold stick in waiting was, or silver stick in waiting, and what's the difference between a lady in waiting and a woman of the bedchamber, and who the hell was the page of the presence, and who was the page of the back stairs, what's the difference between a crown equerry and an equerry, who was the keeper of the privy purse, who was the surveyor of the Queen's pictures. I mean, they were all self-explanatory. So I just had to get to know it. I read up all sorts of stuff, books and books and books and books. I just learned it off by heart. And suddenly before I knew where I was in the Eastern Caribbean covering a royal tour. And I did that for, God no, I don't know, 9 years? Yeah. All through the Diana years, all through the Grand Duchess Fergovich years. Sarah Ferguson, all through all sorts of things. Weddings, funerals, deaths, death of the Duchess of Windsor. Oh, Lord. Couldn't believe it's happening to me. But it's like walking on broken glass, or a tightrope. You just had to get it right. I mean, you had to supply a news service to all of Britain's newspapers, and because of PA's links to the overseas agencies, AP, Australian Associated Press, Agence France Presse, everywhere in the world, and just had to get it right. You had to be a reporter, but at the same time you had to keep in with the royal household. I mean, I kept in particularly with the PA because they paid my salary, but it was quite difficult at times. Yeah, you had to present the news in a straight way, but also make it interesting, so it could be publishable in any paper. I was told to pitch my style between the Telegraph, the Mail, and the PA, so it had to be bright and readable, but at the same time it had to be absolutely rock bottom, secure and right, and not to upset Her Majesty. I was rather disturbed when I discovered the red velvet cushion. The red velvet cushion, the PA had this tape in the press secretary's office at our house, and everything I wrote was taken off this tape, stapled, and put on this red velvet cushion, and then it used to reappear with side notes, like it's like a school essay, like could do better or spelling. And I found that everything I wrote went to the person I was writing about, from the Queen downwards. No, afterwards, went out, after it went out. All this I had to turn it into a learning curve, but at the same time, I wasn't going to rewrite it. They had to. I mean, they're pretty realistic about their coverage. The days when the Palace Press Office was run by Commander Colville, who was known as the no comment man, in other words, the abominable no man, had changed. The Palace Press Office was really constructive. They knew that the royal family wanted a decent press, so within certain parameters they had to make sure they got it. And that was my job, to make sure they got it. But at the same time provide a news service which was publishable in every newspaper in the country. Every day there was a big royal story, virtually every day, because as I said, I was doing it through the Diana years. And all sorts of things were happening. As I said, the Queen Mother was an iconic figure. There's always a story about her. Every member of the royal family had some sort of a controversy circling around them, other than the Queen. Charles and Diana, it was obvious. With the Grand Duchess Fergiana, it was obvious. Well, there are other ones too, like when Princess Alexandra, who was a lovely lady, you know, always so nice to me, when her daughter Marina went off the rails and took up with this guy, totally unsuitable. So many things, I can't remember them all. But I was always a few inches away from trouble. I had to, you know, trying to preserve myself and keep myself out of trouble, but at the same time having to write these things. And of course I had the Rat Pack on my tail, you know. James Whittaker, Harry Arnott from The Sun, Andrew Morton, Ashley Wharton from The Express, all nagging me. Why aren't you doing this, Tom? Why aren't you doing that? Go on, write it this way, Tom. It'll make mine look so much more authentic. So I had those on my tail too. It wasn't just the newspapers, it was all the broadcasting outlets too, ITN, BBC, you name it. And it always used to rather scare me. I'd tap out a story, say, on my fledgling computer, say at 12 noon, and there it would be on BBC News at 1 o'clock, exactly as I wrote it, with the newscaster reading the autocue.